From the Fidelity Bank Foundation studio, PBS Kansas presents One-on-One with Victor Hogstrom.
Exploring the paths that shape Kansas one conversation at a time, my guest this week followed a remarkable path from foreign policy work on Capitol Hill to earning a PhD here in Kansas and becoming an award-winning historian and novelist. Her perspective has been shaped by experiences ranging from a newly independent Sierra Leone to Fulbright fellowships in Europe. She is the author of the landmark History Descend in Wichita and the acclaimed They Met at Wounded Knee, among many other works. She is Dr. Gretchen Eick. Coming up, we'll discuss her journey across continents and disciplines, her exploration of civil rights and Native American history, and her life as a writer and educator. We'll delve into the meaning of descend and the power of uncovering overlooked stories. A fascinating half hour, I might say, is ahead as I go one-on-one with historian and author Dr. Gretchen Eick right now. Hello and welcome to One-on-One. I'm Victor Hogstrom, and our guest tonight is a true polymath, a historian, author, educator, former policy expert whose work consistently pushes us to examine the narratives we think we know. Dr. Gretchen Eick, it's great to have you here today.
That's a new word to me, the polymath. We had to look it up.
You do?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, but it's a pleasure having you, actually. Because,
Thank you.
I mean, you're an author, written about close to 10 books, and worked in Washington, D.C., and traveled the world, and went to school in Sierra Leone.
Yes.
Yes, and West Africa. So, first I want to know what leads your journey.
You and I have something in common. My father was Baptist. He was a Baptist minister, but he was kind of a renegade Baptist minister. He was somebody who said Jesus would not want to have himself known as a cult of personality. Jesus really pointed toward God. Mm-hmm. But Dad and his family background were really committed to working for justice, working for equality, working for a more humane world. And I picked that up from him. And so when I got a chance at 19 to go to study in West Africa as one of the first 5 European American students to study at this African university, the year after it had become, the nation of Sierra Leone became an independent nation, right. My dad was quite supportive. You know, some people in the family were saying, you shouldn't do that, that's too risky. It was great, and it was the decision to let me go, I've always blessed him for, because it changed my life. It just, redirected my course. Yeah.
So, going to school in Africa, compare that, the education versus college education in the United States, because you attended Fora Bay College, mm-hmm. which was one of the well-known colleges mm-hmm. or universities in the country. Sierra Leone. How would you compare and contrast between the educational system there versus the one in the U.S.?
The educational system that was used when I was there was
right.
the British system.
Right.
They were allied with Durham University, so we would study all year and then take exams at the end. And if we passed the exam, then we passed.
That's like law school.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, gee.
It was very demanding, very demanding. I guess it was the professors were good. The student body was excellent. They came from all over Africa, and that was probably the most wonderful part of that year. But because you got to know people from these white minority-ruled Southern African countries, and you got to know people from Nigeria. The largest part of the student body was from Nigeria. They were from all over, Ghana, Gambia, et cetera. So you had this wonderful swath of Africa that you were studying, the best and the brightest of Africa.
Right.
The disadvantage was that being a British university, when they talked about African history, they were talking about British colonial history in Africa. So that, I got very impatient with that from the get-go, and was pushing for reading African authors and reading what happened before the British arrived in Africa. And then I went on and did a master's degree in African studies later to be able to find out some of that.
So then what gives you that spark after that experience?
I mean, I think I have a passion. I just feel a real passion for justice and for, I'm a very curious person. I think that's probably the most important characteristic that I have is as a personality. I'm always wanting to learn more. So I like to I like to teach topics that I don't know much about, but I need to do a lot of research about. I like to write books that require me to do a great deal of investigation. So yeah, I mean, I think the curiosity and the passion.
So after 14 years in Washington, D.C., what prompted the shift to a Kansas PhD at KU?
What happened was I was, by that time, directing an interfaith lobby in Washington. And the organization, at my suggestion, merged with another similar organization. But there was a lot of turmoil between the two organizations as they were trying to get clear their path. And I proposed that that both executive directors resign and that they start the new organization fresh with a whole new set of, a whole new person at the top. And that meant that I needed to look for a job. And meanwhile, I'd fallen in love with a pastor in Kansas, Michael Poge, and decided we were both looking for other jobs. And when I came out here to see him one time, he said, well, my daughter is going to be in Kansas. My youngest daughter is going to be living in Kansas. And that decided it. There was, he needed to be near his daughter. My kids were both grown by that point.
So moving from Capitol Hill politics to KU, what was the biggest, if any, culture shock?
It wasn't so much KU that was the culture shock. It was when I got the job teaching at Friends, because I did my PhD while I was teaching at Friends.
Okay.
And coming to a community where most people had lived here for generations, coming from Washington, where most everybody has come from somewhere else, and where there's a tremendous diversity of people that you work with every day and that you socialize with. I felt like the part of Kansas that I was seeing was way too non-diverse for me. My boss had been Yvonne Delk, a very outstanding black preacher and director of an agency for the United Church of Christ. She had been an incredible influence on my life, and it was just so different to come here and to not see a diversity of people around me. So that was hard, but I decided that I needed to go back and do my PhD. I was a dropout from a PhD program in 1965, and I had decided I really wanted to be involved with the civil rights struggle at that point. So I went back to do a PhD at KU and then commuted between Lawrence and Wichita while I was teaching at Friends.
How did you find teaching at Friends compared to other schools?
I've had mixed feelings about that because to some degree, I wish I had been able to teach grad students. I didn't feel that way at the time, but I since then I've thought, I wish I would have had a group of grad students that I could have helped direct their research. But at the same time, being a small institution, and at that point with only 2 history professors, it meant that I had to learn and had to teach a whole variety of histories. So I had to teach, Mexican history, African American history, African history, U.S. history was my main field, all different areas of U.S. history. And in a way that was really good because it made me expand my own knowledge and be able to think comparatively. And that's something that I think is the most important field of history, to be able to do comparative history. something that I learned just because I had to.
So which one do you enjoy the most of all the?
Oh, that's impossible.
Is it?
It's impossible to answer. Yeah, I mean, basically now I'm a U.S. historian.
Okay.
But I also I'm always bringing in the other histories.
And talking about history, you did a lot of research on the Chester Lewis Park.
I did.
Because of you, it brought that park to life. It gave it life.
I would say that because of the wonderful artwork and the collaborative work of the team that worked on that park, that's what brought it to life. I simply did the background research.
Yeah, but there was the research that brought attention to it all.
Well, that's because of my first book, Descent in Wichita,
Right.
which was the one that really brought Chester's name made Chester's name more familiar to Wichitans and to what had been accomplished by the youth and the Dockham sit-ins and what had been accomplished by Chester. But yeah, that park is just a wonderful way to learn and to teach history, I think. I think it's just a great park. If anybody hasn't seen it, you should go down to Broadway and Douglas and take a look.
Okay, so how would you teach history using that park?
Well, for one thing, as we're seeing people in politics trying to limit our access to a broader story of who has America been and what is America's past, I think as that attempt is being made, if people can go and take the family and take a look at those wonderful painted glass panels, and you don't have to read much. You can use your little QR code and get just a little short example with Carla Eccles voicing over the little storyline. Or you can go to the library and read the longer piece on each. But kids can find out. They see a panel on the swimming pool integration. They see a panel on the Dockham drugstore sit-ins, et cetera. It's just a wonderful exposure to that past and a quickie way of getting kids intrigued and seeing people who look like them making history.
So, Doctor, what sparked your focus on dissent specifically in Wichita and in the broader Midwest civil rights story?
I was debating what I was going to do for my PhD dissertation, and I had begun to work with a couple of local black churches who were doing their histories. They prepared a history of the church. And I was working with one particular congregation to help prepare their history. And when I finished that, my advisor said, well, why don't you do the Dockham sit-ins for your dissertation? No one has ever written about that. And I had been thinking about going a very different route and researching Marcus Garvey's papers at Harvard. But he said, you have to teach. You have to be teaching while you're doing this degree. You can't afford to not be working. So if you did the sit-ins, that would be close at home. So I got that done pretty quickly, and he said, you did that too quickly. You did that too fast for it to be a PhD dissertation. I think you're going to have to expand it to be 20 years of civil rights history in Wichita. So that's what I did. And it was a wonderful entree to the community. Imagine, maybe you can imagine, I'm here feeling like a fish out of water because I am used to living in a very diverse community.
Right.
And I live in a diverse neighborhood, but the social life, the work life doesn't provide that same opportunity. So interviewing people, I interviewed about 80 people for that book, and the interviews took me into homes and got me talking to people and learning this history, and it was a salvation really for me.
So you've written, as I said earlier, about 10 books. Mm-hmm. What are the ones among your favorite?
That's a tough one also, because they're very different. I have a saga about a family, a black and white family, mixed race family, that begins in the civil rights years. Maybe Crossings is the first book in that series. Mm-hmm. And then it picks up with their children and what's happened with their children. And I love those characters. And the second book picks up in 2019, when the father of the family is murdered in Chicago, and riding the L back to Evanston. And it takes up the whole subject of grieving, but it also takes up what happened in Philadelphia in 1985 when the Philadelphia police dropped bombs on a row house and set fire to an entire neighborhood in Philadelphia to try to eradicate an organization called MOVE, because her father, her birth father, was part of that movement. So that enabled me to expand my own knowledge of that part of America's history and really, and also introduce characters who were Jamaican American, which was really fun. The last book, Resistance, my most recent one that just came out, picks up with the grandchild of the civil rights era. She's 20-something in 25 in 2027's future set. And she goes to Paris to get a PhD in artificial intelligence. And she gets recruited. She arrives just as the extreme right party, the National Front Party in France, has been elected to office. She decides with her professor that she will take on the challenge of helping rescue artificial intelligence from NATO's headquarters in Estonia because the Russians are on the move into the Baltics. And the story unfolds, and the whole question of when are you called to resist, and how far does that resistance go, is raised in this book.
When you were writing Descent in Wichita, I'm assuming you had some challenges, some pushbacks from the established narratives. Tell us about those.
Well, there still are pushbacks.
Oh, yeah?
The Descent in Wichita is on the wall at the Smithsonian's Museum of African American History and Culture. And Carol Parks Hahn and Ron Walters, there's a photograph of them on the wall. But it's on the wall with the sit-ins in Greensboro and in Nashville, Tennessee. And it's because there's those communities, especially Greensboro, is very assertive about the fact that they were the first successful, they were the first student sit-ins. And we were actually 18 months before them, and Ron Walters went to Fisk and went out to these other communities, sent there by a biracial group of women who were trying to promote full human rights in Wichita. And he was able to tell them what had happened in Wichita. And the sports networks also spread that word. So I think there's good evidence that we were first. We were not acclaimed as the first by the NAACP, who did not want Wichita to use that tactic. But when Oklahoma City started sit-ins about a week later, after ours concluded, Oklahoma City had recruited 2,000 youth to a sit-in movement. And so Roy Wilkins, the head of the national NAACP, said, I guess I can't stand in the way of this, even though it isn't a tactic that I support. I really support working through the courts. But if you are recruiting 2,000 students to participate in this, we'll support you. So Oklahoma, rather than Wichita, got more of the credit for being the Midwestern sit-ins. They went on for 5 years. Ours went on for 5 years, but not. Dockham sit-in was successful by middle of August in 1958.
So, Dr. Eick, how did you handle the pushbacks?
We had a number of editorial pieces, op-ed pieces some years ago with Greensboro. I would send things, and they would send things. There still are some scholars who will say that Wichita was not the first. It was among the first, but I haven't seen evidence. The thing is, probably as research proceeds, we will find out that it's not just Wichita, that they were happening all over the Midwest. The problem is when people die out and then younger people come along and study a movement like the Civil Rights Movement, they may think that the Civil Rights Movement is a Southern phenomenon, whereas people who lived through the time know that it happened all across the country and that Jim Crow laws were national. Right. Happened all across the country as well. So history is going to expand with time, and we may find lots of other places that there were sit-ins in the 50s.
The Dockham sit-in was largely forgotten. So what does that say about delayed recognition revealed about control's historical moments? I think it says that it's really important not to lose the data that is the personal history.
You have a personal history, I have a personal history. The people who participated in those sit-ins have that history. And if it doesn't get shared and doesn't get written down and the newspaper coverage stored away in a box somewhere, and the next generation, when we die, recognizing that this is not something to throw out, it's something to send to the Historical Association. You know, if it's Kansas, it's the Kansas State Historical Association. Send all that material up there with your photographs so that it is preserved, so that people who come along later can actually recognize and research it.
So beyond the awards for dissent in Wichita, what single research discovery impacted you most personally?
I couldn't understand why Chester Lewis, who was a well-known lawyer, who was on the national board, he was the national vice president of the NAACP until he began to oppose Roy Wilkins. I couldn't understand why I wasn't finding anything in the NAACP papers when I read them in Washington, D.C. in the manuscript room of the Library of Congress. Until one day I came across a piece of paper. It was a letter from Roy Wilkins to his secretary saying, remove the name of Chester Lewis from everything in our documents.
Oh.
And it was, oh my goodness.
And why was that?
Because he had opposed Wilkins and tried to get him replaced as the head of the NAACP.
I see.
He had led the movement to try to get the NAACP to address economic racism, not just political and civil racism. And it was a big movement, and they came within one vote of replacing Wilkins. And Wilkins' response was, banish this man's name from our history. And they did, from those records, but there are lots of other records.
Right, right. Okay, time for a slight detour.
Yeah.
With something a bit lighter. So let's play a finish the phrase game. I'll start a sentence, you complete it with the first thing that comes to mind.
Okay.
Okay? First one. If Capitol Hill were an animal, it would be a...
I was going to say rhinoceros.
And
rhinoceros.
And why is that?
Because it has lots of armor around it, and it has lots of sharp horns. It moves very, very slowly. It doesn't seem to be very intelligent.
My most vivid memory from Sierra Leone is the color.
Green. Because Sierra Leone is an absolutely beautiful tropical country. Everything is green, although there would also be red and orange and frangipani and
Right.
hibiscus, etc.
Researching Wounded Knee, another book of yours, felt like walking through
A battlefield of corpses that didn't have to be there. And that's not just the Battle of Wounded Knee, it's so much of the destruction of indigenous people's history.
a Fulbright scholar's suitcase should always contain.
Ooh, not much.
Why not?
Because you want to travel light and you want to live with the people that you're working with and purchase things from their stores and sometimes dress the way they dress and maybe some books, but travel light. That's my belief about any travel.
If pacifism had a superpower, it would be?
Empathy. Can I say something about pacifism for just a minute?
Please do.
I'm currently working on a novel that is about my grandmother and my great-grandfather and their families. And I discovered that a relative was a pacifist during World War I. They were plain-dressing Church of the Brethren people and Quakers. And I learned that there were 500 conscientious objectors in World War I who were actually executed. And that just blew me away. They didn't know what to do with them, so they sent them to military encampments. Lots of times they'd be beaten up. They'd be, if they wouldn't wear military uniforms, they would be sent to Leavenworth, and many were actually killed. That's the kind of thing that when you find a little tidbit like that, it's like, oh my gosh, there's more to this story, and this is a story people need to know. You know, we need to have room for all kinds of ideas.
I understand you really dig hard when you're researching.
I do, yeah.
It's a passion?
It's a passion.
What's been the most exciting moment in your research? If you have one or two or three.
Well, I mean, right now, I could say from right now, I had this patriarchal family of men that were, you know, very definitely the dominant figures in their households of my grandfather and my great-grandfather. And I always kind of disliked them just because they were patriarchs. And now that I'm researching and writing about them, I'm having the exciting time of having to get inside who they might have been, what were the issues they struggled with, what were their internal debates, and it's been fun. You know, it's opened up other aspects of who I am also.
All right, continuing this game, the last phrase.
Okay.
The Kansas prairie whispers.
Home.
Oh, okay. Now, your Crossings novel series suggests struggle and transition. So what repeatedly draws you to these themes in fiction?
I believe that's what life is all about, is finding ways to maneuver past the disappointments and the challenges that we face and to get to a new place, to get to the other side, whether it's grief, whether it's other kinds of disappointments, whether, you know, whatever.
Your current novel is about your pacifist ancestors, the current one you're working on today.
Yes.
How does fictionalizing your own family feel different from your historical work?
That's a very good question. I guess I keep asking myself, because I was very close to my grandmother, and because I have to, she told me a lot of the stories that became the basis for what invited me into doing this novel. I keep asking myself, or asking her, Grandma, am I being fair to you? Am I creating your dilemmas and your process in a way that is fair and that you would be pleased with? My grandmother was a person who wanted to be an elocutionist, a public speaker. And I've always thought, because I was very close to her, that in my life I do a lot of public speaking, that in a way I've come to live out the life that she wished she could have had.
Right.
So I feel a very strong connection. So I'm asking that question all the time.
What's there yet that you like to write about, that you haven't written about?
I'd like yet to write several historical novels. These are novels that have a lot of history in them, but they're not traditional historical novels. So I'd like to do, that's what I'm trying to do with this one, with my grandmother and my great-grandfather as characters, as main characters. So yes.
Dr. Gretchen Eick, this has been a riveting conversation.
Oh, thank you.
And thank you so much.
It's so wonderful to talk with you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Great to have you.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. If you have a question or comment, please email us at oneonone@kpts.org. Until next time, I'm Victor Hogstrom. See you soon.